a community shaken by unspeakable tragedy. On the morning of February 20th, 2025, a horrific discovery shattered the quiet community of Carrollton, Georgia. Inside a home on Carrollton Road in Carroll County, 41-year-old Kristen Brock and her 45-year-old husband James Brock were found dead in their bed, victims of multiple gunshot wounds. The person who discovered their bodies was their 6-year-old daughter. The person who called 911 to report the tragedy was Kristen's 17-year-old daughter, Sarah Grace Patrick. And according to investigators, the person responsible for their deaths was Sarah Grace Patrick herself. The case has captured regional attention not only because of the brutal nature of the crime, but because it strikes at the heart of one of society's deepest assumptions, that children are safe with their parents, and parents are safe with their children. The investigation that followed would span months, consume thousands of man-hours, and involve multiple law enforcement agencies. It would also raise troubling questions about what could drive a teenager to allegedly commit such an act of violence against the people who raised her. The discovery and initial investigation. Carroll County Sheriff's deputies responded to the home in the 1500 block of Carrollton Road on the morning of February 20th, 2025. What they found inside was a scene of unspeakable horror. Kristen and James Brock had been shot to death while they slept in their bed. The couple's young daughter, only 6 years old, had made the grim discovery when she went to check on her parents that morning. According to family members who spoke with media outlets in the aftermath, the little girl had gone into the bedroom because she expected her mother to be awake by that time. When she grabbed her mother's hand, it was ice cold. The traumatized child then witnessed a scene no child should ever see. Sarah Grace Patrick, who was 16 years old at the time of the killings, was the one who placed the 911 call. From the very beginning, as Ashley Hulsey, spokesperson for the Carroll County Sheriff's Office, would later describe it, a relentless investigation began, one that would span months, consume thousands of man-hours, and require the full weight of local and federal law enforcement agency partnerships. Investigators quickly determined they were dealing with a double homicide. Critically, no firearm was found at the scene, which immediately ruled out the possibility of a murder-suicide. The missing weapon became a crucial piece of evidence that investigators would pursue throughout their investigation. The couple had been shot multiple times, and the violence of the attack suggested this was no accident or crime of sudden passion, but rather a calculated act. The victims, Kristen and James Brock. To understand the magnitude of this tragedy, it's important to understand who Kristen and James Brock were to their community. By all accounts, they were beloved members of their neighborhood and active participants in their local church, Catalyst Church in Carrollton. Kristen Brock was remembered by friends and fellow church members as a vibrant, warm person who made everyone feel welcome. Tasha Meza, a member of Catalyst Church, described her in an interview with Fox 5 Atlanta. Kristen was bubbly and fun, and she loved hugs. She never met a stranger. Several church members spoke about the couple through tears, painting a picture of two people deeply embedded in their community and committed to their faith and family. James Brock, despite facing significant health challenges, was described as a devoted stepfather. He lived with a left ventricular assist device, LVD, a mechanical pump that helped his heart function. This medical device would become a significant detail in the investigation, as it had an alarm that would sound when there were issues. The presence of this device, and the noise it made, would later become a point of contention when examining what Sarah Grace Patrick claimed to have heard on the night of the murders. The couple had been together for nearly a decade and were raising 3 children together. Patrick from Kristen's previous relationship, and 2 younger daughters, ages 6 and 16. They had built what appeared from the outside to be a normal, loving family life in their Carroll County home. Dennis and Linda Nolan, Kristen's parents and Sarah's grandparents, were devastated by the loss. Dennis Nolan told reporters in the immediate aftermath of the killings, if it was of natural causes, it would maybe feel differently, but to go this way, it's really tough. The family immediately offered a $5,000 reward for information leading to the arrest of whoever was responsible for the murders, never imagining at that time that investigators would eventually point to their own granddaughter. Months of investigation, building the case. For nearly 5 months, the investigation proceeded largely out of public view. While the case hadn't generated significant media attention during this period, investigators were far from idle. The Carroll County Sheriff's Office, in collaboration with the FBI and the Georgia Bureau of Investigation Crime Lab, as well as private forensic laboratories, was systematically building what they would later describe as mountains of evidence. Investigator T.J. Repetto led the case, coordinating the efforts of multiple agencies and piecing together what had happened on that February morning. The investigation involved processing physical evidence from the crime scene, conducting interviews with family members, friends, and neighbors, analyzing forensic data, and following numerous leads. Throughout this period, Sarah Grace Patrick remained free, living with her biological father. She had not been named as a suspect, and to the outside world, she appeared to be a grieving daughter coping with an unimaginable tragedy. She even delivered a eulogy at her mother and stepfather's funeral, standing before family and friends to speak about the people she would later be accused of murdering. But investigators were watching, and they were building their case methodically. They were examining every detail, every inconsistency, every piece of evidence that might point them toward the truth of what happened that night. The arrest, July 8, 2025. On July 8, 2025, nearly 5 months after the murders, the Carroll County Sheriff's Office called a press conference to make a stunning announcement. They had obtained arrest warrants for Sarah Grace Patrick, charging her with 2 counts of murder and 2 counts of aggravated assault in connection with the deaths of her mother and stepfather. From the very moment the 911 call was received, a relentless investigation began, said Ashley Halsey at the news conference. The announcement shocked many who knew the family, but Halsey emphasized that investigators were confident in their case. "We feel confident that she is responsible for their murders," she stated. Patrick, now 17 years old, turned herself in that morning, accompanied by her biological father, when she was notified of the outstanding warrants. Despite being just 17, prosecutors made the decision to charge her as an adult, given the serious nature of the alleged crimes. Halsey acknowledged the difficulty of comprehending such a case. "We don't know what goes through the mind of a child who wants to harm their parents." She also made it clear that the investigation was far from over. "The pursuit of justice does not end today," Halsey said. "It is very possible that because this remains an open and ongoing investigation that more arrests and charges could be made." The sheriff's office declined to provide specific details about the evidence that led them to charge Patrick, citing the ongoing nature of the investigation. They confirmed that there was still evidence to process and interviews to conduct, including with Patrick herself. A clear motive had not been publicly established at that time. The evidence and allegations. While much of the evidence in the case remains sealed due to the ongoing legal proceedings, several details have emerged through court hearings and public statements that paint a troubling picture. Prosecutors have indicated that they believe the shootings were premeditated. The couple was shot multiple times while they slept in their bed, suggesting an attack that was both deliberate and calculated. The fact that the murder weapon was never found at the scene indicates that whoever committed the murders removed the gun from the home afterward, another sign of premeditation and an attempt to conceal evidence. One of the most significant pieces of evidence involves Patrick's own statements and behavior following the killings. According to family members and court testimony, there were numerous inconsistencies in her account of what she heard that night. Kristen Dowda, Patrick's step-cousin and the niece of James Brock, spoke publicly about these inconsistencies after the arrest. She has never admitted to hearing the shots themselves, but she did say she heard the heart monitor, Dowda explained. "While loud, of course it is, we know there were at minimum 4 gunshots that night. So, when you combine 4 gunshots and a heart monitor, that's a lot of noise for you not to hear." This detail is particularly significant because James Brock's LVD device had an alarm that would sound when there were problems. Patrick acknowledged hearing this alarm throughout the night in her social media posts. In a TikTok comment, She wrote that she heard the alarm 10 to 20 minutes before going to bed, though she claimed it was faint due to background noise. The question that arose was, if she could hear the heart device alarm, how could she not hear multiple gunshots fired in the same house? Social media activity and red flags. In the days and weeks following the murders, Patrick maintained an active presence on social media, posting content that would later be scrutinized by both investigators and the public. She posted grieving TikTok videos that appear to show her processing the trauma of losing her parents. To some, these appeared to be the genuine expressions of a devastated daughter. To others, particularly after her arrest, they seemed calculated and deceptive. Perhaps most disturbing were revelations that Patrick had reached out to true crime content creators on TikTok, asking them to cover the case. One creator who runs a page called Allegedly Reportedly, with nearly 120,000 followers, shared screenshots of direct messages she claimed came from Patrick. She messaged me on June 3rd and said, "Look up Brock case," the creator explained in a video. When asked for clarification about which case she meant, Patrick allegedly responded with her mother and stepfather's names. The creator later expressed shock and disbelief. "Why would you ask me to cover a case where you're going to get arrested for taking your parents' lives?" This behavior raised serious questions about Patrick's state of mind and intentions. Was she trying to influence public perception of the case? Was she seeking attention? Or was there some other motivation behind reaching out to true crime influencers about a case in which she would later be charged? Family division and allegations. The case has created a deep rift within the family, with different relatives taking opposing positions about Patrick's guilt or innocence. Dennis Nolan, Kristen's father and Patrick's grandfather, has publicly defended her innocence. Outside the courtroom during various hearings, he has insisted that there is no physical evidence tying her to the murders and that investigators have not produced the murder weapon. On the other side, James Brock's family members have expressed their belief in Patrick's guilt and their fear of her. Kim Bowling, James Brock's sister, testified at Patrick's bond hearing about her concerns. "I was just nervous. Nervous because I know what she's accused of doing and I'm not going to back down," she said when asked what it was like seeing her niece. In a tearful statement, she added, "If the defendant can kill her own parents in such a violent manner, I fear for my own safety and the safety of my family and friends." Kristen Dowda has been particularly vocal about her belief that Patrick is responsible for the murders. She described Sarah as having two very different sides and said that James had told family members multiple times that "you don't know the real Sarah." Dowda characterized the crime, if Patrick is indeed guilty, as very calculated. There have been rumors online suggesting that James Brock had been abusive toward Patrick, which some have speculated could provide a motive for the killings. However, when directly asked about these allegations, Dowda stated that there were text messages where people had asked Patrick directly if James was abusive, though she did not reveal Patrick's responses to those questions. The defense has not publicly claimed abuse as a defense, and no evidence of such abuse has been presented in court proceedings that have been made public. Bond hearing and additional charges. In August 2025, Patrick appeared in court for a bond hearing, during which Judge Dustin Hightower heard emotional testimony from both sides. Friends and supporters of Patrick testified about her character, with her pastor describing praying with her in jail and discussing what she was reading. Her friends contended that she just doesn't have this in her and is not the evil person the Brock family is making her out to be, as family friend Carrie Jensen testified. However, Judge Hightower ultimately denied bond. In his ruling, he stated, "I believe those closest to Patrick have vast concerns that she would be able to flee if released and that she would pose a continuing danger to the community and potentially to family members." The judge determined that Patrick could potentially manipulate or influence witnesses if released. By the time of the bond hearing, prosecutors had added additional charges. Patrick now faces 2 counts of malice murder in addition to the original 2 counts of murder and 2 counts of aggravated assault, plus 2 weapons charges. The escalation of charges suggests that prosecutors believe they have substantial evidence to support the most serious murder charges under Georgia law. The path to trial. The case has moved forward through the court system, though not without delays. A trial date was initially set for January 5, 2026. Defense attorneys indicated they were awaiting a written report from a forensic neuropsychologist who evaluated Patrick in August 2025. This psychological evaluation would become a key piece of evidence that both sides wanted to examine. During a court hearing in early December 2025, the defense said they were still waiting on the final results of the psychological exam. The state requested the opportunity to conduct their own examination. Judge Hightower, while reluctant to grant a continuance, acknowledged that both the defense and prosecution needed adequate time to review the psychological evidence and determine if additional expert testimony would be needed. Even though I am very reluctant to give a continuance in this case, I do think that it would be appropriate, Judge Hightower said. With that being said, I don't want this case to languish. I still hold by what I told Ms. Patrick at the beginning. I don't want her to sit where she doesn't need to sit if that's not where she's supposed to be. In January 2026, the trial was delayed to allow both sides to complete their review of the psychological evaluation and to give the state time to conduct its own assessment if deemed necessary. The judge made it clear that he wanted to move the case forward as quickly as possible while ensuring fairness to both sides. As of early February 2026, the case remains in pre-trial proceedings. Ashley Hulsey has continued to emphasize that the investigation remains active and ongoing, with the possibility that additional arrests or charges could be forthcoming. The sheriff's office has indicated that they are still processing evidence and conducting interviews. Unanswered questions and the road ahead. As the case moves toward trial, numerous questions remain unanswered. What was the motive for the killings? If Patrick is responsible, why would a teenager kill her mother and stepfather in such a brutal manner? What was the relationship really like inside the Brock household? Were there warning signs that were missed? The question of the missing murder weapon looms large over the case. Where's the gun that was used to kill Kristen and James Brock? If Patrick is responsible, what did she do with it? Finding the weapon could provide crucial physical evidence linking her to the crime, or potentially pointing investigators toward another suspect if it surfaces in an unexpected location. The psychological evaluation of Patrick may provide some insights into her mental state and capacity at the time of the alleged crimes. Depending on its findings, it could influence how the defense approaches the case and what arguments they make at trial. Will they argue that Patrick is not guilty? Will they present evidence of mental illness or diminished capacity? Will they claim she acted in self-defense or was subjected to abuse that led her to snap? The community of Carrollton continues to grapple with the tragedy. For those who knew Kristen and James Brock, the loss is still fresh and painful. Their youngest daughter, who discovered her parents' bodies, will carry that trauma for the rest of her life. The middle daughter witnessed the aftermath of events that destroyed her family. And regardless of the trial's outcome, she has lost her mother, her stepfather, and potentially her sister as well. Legal and ethical considerations. The decision to charge Patrick as an adult has raised questions about juvenile justice and how society should handle cases where teenagers are accused of serious violent crimes. At 16, when the alleged crimes occurred, Patrick was technically a minor, yet prosecutors determined that the nature of the crimes warranted adult charges. Under Georgia law, juveniles as young as 13 can be charged as adults for certain serious crimes, including murder. The decision typically depends on factors such as the severity of the crime, the juvenile's criminal history, their age and maturity, and whether rehabilitation in the juvenile system is deemed appropriate. In cases involving murder, prosecutors often opt to charge defendants as adults regardless of age, particularly in cases involving multiple victims or evidence of premeditation. If convicted as an adult, Patrick could face life in prison. Georgia law provides for sentences of life with or without the possibility of parole for murder convictions. The death penalty is not an option, as the Supreme Court has ruled that capital punishment for crimes committed while under 18 is unconstitutional. The broader context. The Patrick case is, tragically, not unique in involving a teenager accused of killing parents. While such cases are relatively rare, they capture public attention because they violate deeply held societal expectations about family relationships and the natural order of things. Research into cases of juveniles who kill their parents, a crime known as parricide, has identified several common factors. These can include a history of abuse in the home, mental illness, substance abuse, and in some cases, the influence of others. Whether any of these factors played a role in the Brock case remains to be seen as the legal proceedings continue. The case also highlights the challenges facing investigators when a family member is a suspect. The person who called 911, who appeared to be a grieving daughter, was ultimately charged with crimes. This required investigators to look beyond initial appearances and follow the evidence wherever it led, even when it pointed to a conclusion that seemed almost unthinkable. The wait for justice. As this article is being written in February 2026, the case remains in the pretrial phase. Sarah Grace Patrick remains in custody at the Carroll County Detention Center, held without bond. The prosecution continues to prepare its case, working with forensic experts, reviewing evidence, and preparing to present what they claim is overwhelming proof of Patrick's guilt. The defense team is preparing its own case, reviewing the prosecution's evidence, conducting their own investigation, and determining the best strategy to defend their client. They face significant challenges given the public statements about mountains of evidence, but they also have the fundamental principle that Patrick is presumed innocent until proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. For the family members on both sides, the wait for trial is agonizing. The Brock family wants justice for Kristen and James. Dennis and Linda Nolan want their granddaughter exonerated if she is truly innocent, or they face the unbearable reality that their granddaughter killed their daughter. The two younger daughters have lost their parents and are caught in the middle of a family torn apart by tragedy and accusations. The community of Carrollton, meanwhile, watches and waits. Catalyst Church continues to mourn the loss of two beloved members. Neighbors and friends struggle to understand how something so horrific could happen in their midst. And a courtroom in Carroll County will eventually become the site where these questions will be examined, evidence will be presented, and a jury will be asked to determine the truth of what happened on that February morning in 2025. Conclusion. The Carroll County double murder case involving Sarah Grace Patrick represents one of the most disturbing criminal cases in recent Georgia history. The alleged murder of parents by their teenage daughter strikes at fundamental assumptions about family, safety, and the bonds between parent and child. Whatever the outcome of the trial, the tragedy has already left an indelible mark on everyone involved. Two people are dead. A 6-year-old child discovered their bodies. A family is shattered beyond repair, and a community's sense of security has been fundamentally shaken. The criminal justice system will now have its say. Prosecutors will present their evidence. Defense attorneys will challenge that evidence and present their own case. A jury will deliberate and reach a verdict, and a judge will impose a sentence if there is a conviction. But no verdict, no sentence, no legal proceeding can undo what happened on February 20th, 2025. It cannot bring Kristen and James Brock back to life. It cannot erase the trauma experienced by their youngest daughter. It cannot heal the divisions within the family. It can only provide accountability, seek justice, and perhaps offer some measure of closure to those left behind to grapple with this unfathomable tragedy. As the case proceeds toward trial, the world watches to see how this disturbing chapter will conclude and what answers, if any, will emerge about what really happened in that Carroll County home on that terrible February morning.